now. Let me just do a short prayer. Father, Lord, thank you for bringing us here. Thank you for the vision of Lighthouse. Thank you for the thriving intern. Thank you for everybody that will be starting intern year in June, July. We just commit them into your hands in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Lighthouse and Lighthouse vision and me before I jump into our presentation today. So Lighthouse was a vision that I had. Let me start the slide presentation. Yeah, Lighthouse was a vision that I had that was a vow I made to myself when I was in between medical school and residency. I had a 2-year break in between, and I found that there was a lack of mentorship, a lack of support. And personally, I went through a lot of personal struggles to complete my medical education. And I made a vow that if I had a chance, I would make sure that anybody coming behind me didn't go through, what I went through. So I'm Dr. Eniola Ajanaku. I'm Nigerian born. I moved to United States at 18. I went to University of Chicago and then I went to medical school in Howard University and then completed residency I know Nova Fairfax. Currently, I'm a medical hospitalist consultant, which is I'm a pure medicinist. I don't deal with social work. I don't deal with all the non-nice aspects of medicine. What I do is I consult for her rehab facility and, for their patients, any hypertension, diabetes, all that. So I love that because I do the hospitalist schedule, but I don't have the hospitalist stress of social work and dealing with the social aspect of medicine. And I like it. The drawback is that I do see a lot of patients. I have to see about 35 to 40 patients every day. So that's a quite few number of patients. So I think talking about Lighthouse, I found this problem and I said, you know what, when I was finished with training or when I was done with training, I would make sure nobody went through what I went through getting to medical school. But in that pain was born something else inside of me. I began to have a relationship with God, not just religion, but a true relationship with God. I began to know him as a savior, as a friend. I began to know him as my everything. And it was a process, and I thank God for it. And I can't talk about Lighthouse without talking about that. We are a Christian organization, but we're open to all. I think our life mentorship basically flows from those lenses, and our career mentorship in a way flows from those lenses, but most of the topics like thriving intern or chasing the dream and matching success, all the whole point is to catch you as you're training through medical school in different points of your training trajectory. So basically, from entry medical school, which is chasing the dream, and then matching success, which is basically maybe second year to third year and fourth year, you guys, or basically you're really doctors, but once you're done, positioning you for success when you enter medical school. So I'm passionate about that. And I'm also passionate about making sure that you guys understand that I'm talking about a relationship with God and allowing him to take ownership of your life. He died for all of us. I do believe that, and our relationship has its ups and downs, but I'm passionate about him, and I implore you guys to give him a chance. If you do encounter him, and we have programs that if you decide that you want to go on that relationship and journey with Christ, we'll help you with that. So our speakers today, I think I've already introduced myself. I'm Dr. Eniola Ajanaku. I'm an internal medicine consultant. We have Dr. Nneoma Okoronkwo, who will be coming later. We have Dr. Anand Patel, who is a hematologist oncologist. Nneoma is a gastroenterologist. Or Dr. Ronke Taiwo will not be with us live, but she will record a video and send it to us. So what is the purpose of intern year? So basically, I don't consider anybody that's finished medical school a practicing doctor. Basically, you're a doctor by I won't say face value, but you have the certificate. But the practice of being a physician actually happens in residency. That's when you are with the doctors. You learn to be a doctor by mentorship, by observation, by modeling. You learn how to lead a team. You learn how to coordinate a team. And then you have a realistic experience of the practice of medicine. One thing that me and my friend usually says as a doctor is that we didn't feel that we had a right feel of medicine, because having 1 month in one rotation, 2 months in rotation doesn't really give you what medicine is. That is where you live, breathe medicine when you're in intern year, when you're in residency, and that's when you truly become a doctor. I put in my slide organized medical training hazing, because I do believe in training there is a hazing component. There is a part of it that is a little bit not so pleasant. There is a part of it that we don't usually talk about. Someone once said or likened medical training to the military, that type of rank that you have, that type of order. So you have the attending, you have the residents, you have the interns, you have the medical students, and everybody has their own rank, and they kind of just follow the leader who's the attending, and you can't really question things. Medical training, I believe, is a little bit of a harsh environment. It has to be, because if you think about what we are supposed to do, we're supposed to save lives, so there has to be a vigor of training that you go through. But the flip side of it is, I think there's a little bit of component of hazing, and you have to learn how to basically interact with the people that you're going to deal with in your career, interact with your residency and as you go through your training, and make the correct choices as you go along. So things that you may know but may not know but need to know. Before I go into that, I'm going to tell you about my story in intern year. So in intern year, I did have a break between medical training and intern year. And what happened was, once I started training, I was started on cardiology CCU, which wasn't a very regimented rotation. It's different from every residency, but it wasn't regimented. So I didn't really understand how things were going on in the wards, which is really the bulk of medicine, at least internal medicine. And so I started internal medicine by my third rotation, because they gave me a 2-year, like a month 2, I was told to take a break, maybe do outpatient, because cardiology is really hard. And interns are not expected to do a lot, so it's more on the residents. But what happened is that at my third month, I was not at the same level as my counterparts, because I wasn't in the wards. They had done 2 months of wards. They knew the expectations, knew what to expect, knew how to act, but I didn't. So I started much, almost like a step behind them. And what that led to is me going to remediation. And I think if I could tell you what happened, I would say it would be a culture mismatch between me and the residency, a lack of self-awareness from me, and a little bit of a complaining attitude from me. I will be frank and tell you guys what led to that. But I know that there are things I could have done. The remediation actually helped me. It made me a better doctor. But there are things I could have done that I didn't have to do, go through that. And it actually happens more often than people say it does. The thing is that the promotion from intern year to resident year is actually not guaranteed. That's the one that you have a committee or a group of people that kind of sit down and say, can we promote this person? Because if you think about it, residency is when you become a team leader. You're now responsible for the intern. I liken it to being a store manager. A resident is kind of like a store manager. You have the attending that might be a little bit removed from the things, but the resident is the store manager. So you have more leadership. And so if you're not meeting your competencies, it's very, very dangerous for patient care and then for the team. So all residencies are different, but you have, people that go through remediation, which is when you see that an intern lacks a certain, hasn't met certain competencies, and then they try and help you. And then you have probation. Probation is reportable. Probation is when you have gone through remediation and they feel like you're still not meeting the standard. Probation is reportable, as I said before. And when you go through job applications, some don't care, but I have seen like Kaiser, which is a big corporate medicine company, will ask you about probation in residency. So these are things you should be aware of. So what my next slide is about perception. Our career or our practice of medicine is largely performative, right? Because you are going to go into a room, you're going to have anxious family or anxious patients and people asking you for what is going on with their loved one. You're going to have these people there, right? And you're going to be there with your intern, your resident. I'm talking from an attendance point of view. You're going to have a nurse that's asking you questions. It's not performing like you're performing being an actor, but you have to appear confident, because your lack of confidence can be picked up by a patient's family, and they're going to wonder, should I listen to what this doctor is saying? Because you're dealing with life and death. So that's why it's so important to know that in medicine, perception is everything, especially in residency, where you are being evaluated with every interaction that you do. Just take that for the first 3 months, every interaction that you engage in, you are being evaluated on it. Why? Because in residency, it's not really it's not really your intention that matters, it's your perception, right? It's how people perceive you to be. So you could be a caring intern, you could be a caring resident, you could, be very confident, be very smart. But if you are perceived as not smart or not confident or not competent, that is a wasted opportunity. So you have to make sure your perception and, your intention kind of match, right? You have to make sure that there's no mismatch between that. And sometimes perception is affected by how people see you, how their own cultural strongholds, their own experiences, their own expectations. It sometimes has nothing to do with you, but they have this certain perception of you that may be negative or positive, because they're looking at through their own lenses. So I implore you not to be aware of that, but to also be yourself, right? You shouldn't be that resident or intern that we know is just always sucking up, and their intentions don't match their perception. They just care about how they are looked at. You should make sure that both match, and then still not lose your individuality. Even as an attending, I will say a story of practicing as an attending, and where I practiced, you can leave after you've seen your patient. So I did a bunch of orders and I left. And I talked to a few nurses, but there was a complaint about me. It was perceived that I didn't care about the patients because there were a couple of orders they didn't have answers on, and I wasn't around to answer them, and they had to call me. So of course I know I care, but the perception was that I didn't care, and I was called into the principal's office. So it still happens. You have to make sure your intention meets your perception. And from that day, I made sure to touch base with my nurse managers and my nurses before I leave, to make sure that we're all on the same page. So how do you thrive in intern year? Is it possible to thrive in intern year? I think this is so important that I'm going to tell you guys that you should have confidence and not arrogance, right? There are going to be many jokes about you, especially if you start in the summer, July intern, slow intern, or if the intern she just started, or the intern is going to ask about Tylenol. These things, quote unquote, are funny, but they're not funny. I feel if somebody tells you that you are bad or not good, or dismisses you or devalues you enough, you're going to start to believe it. So I want to make sure that everybody starting in June or July separates yourself from those labels. You might even just laugh with them, but in yourself, tell them, I'm not a July intern. I'm not slow. I'm not, I'm not a bad intern, because these things, when you imbibe them, they will affect your confidence. And you have to know that your value is not dependent on your mistakes or your labels or the labels or whatever they call you. Your value is different. You completed medical school, you went through a vigorous training. You know it, but you just don't know what you know. So that's the difference between confidence and arrogance, right? Arrogance, I believe, an arrogant intern does not know their limitations. You have limitations because you are not really a doctor yet. It's residency that makes you a doctor. When you practice it, medical school is theory, residency is the practice of medicine. So why do they feel superior? Because they have been practicing for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, compared to somebody that's never practiced. So the whole concept of having a July intern is actually foolish. You are not doctors yet. You are in there for training. And that's why I get the hazing component of medicine. I think there should be a little bit more compassion and grace. But we're not here to change the system. We're here to make sure you get through the system. So what I say is that you have that confidence, but realize that have that posture of humility, because I believe in this level of your training, you don't know what you don't know yet. And as you go more, as you are confident, you will make mistakes, but don't let that label you or kind of affect your confidence too much. Yes, another thing about medicine, people talk, as I said, every note, every medical interaction, everything you're doing, assume people are talking, assume people are evaluating you, assume people are rating you in your head. This happens in the first 3 months of residency. So after that, if you are labeled, sometimes it's very difficult to change perception of you. If in the first 3 months you did not hit the ground running, you have to make sure all through your intern you're doing that, but most especially for your first 3 months, you are hitting the ground running. You are there because they're rating you. They're trying to see which interns may not be meeting competencies, which ones will have problems and all that. And this is a principle applicable even as an attending, because now medicine is such a small community. I practice corporate medicine, and we're just a handful of hospitals, handful of medical groups, and we kind of really all know each other. And so when you see somebody's name as coming to join the group, or you're going to work with them, there's a perception or you have, they're like, oh, thank God, this is doctor. But sometimes it could be the other way, that, oh my goodness, they have put this doctor with me. I know that he's not going to work, or it's going to be a hard time for me. That's the same thing with residency. Once you have been labeled as something, people kind of talk about it, and you have to be aware that is happening. The reason why an attending can write a very short note, or I can write a short note, is because you have a proven track record. You have done things. As a consultant, I've caught PEs, I have saved patients' lives literally. So I don't have to prove myself with my notes. But the whole point of interning and residency is kind of like you're still proving yourself that you are good until you have that proven track record that only can come from experience. So guys, this is very, very important to me. I feel like this is one thing that would have probably saved me from remediation, actually made me work on myself, and made me position myself to be a better intern and then resident. Ask for feedback before feedback. What do I mean? There mandated scheduled feedback sessions in every residency. Some residencies is every 1 month, if some residencies is every 2 weeks. Some residencies are actually good, they do it every week. But the thing is that even though it's in the schedule, doesn't mean it happens, right? And so I'm going to give you like a real life intern year scenario and just read it out to you. So Dr. Smith, intern, is on team B, Dr. Nancy Reyes, and she's the attending. And she has a pet peeve. She dislikes interns that lean on the wall while any presentation is going on. She believes it shows a lack of interest. She has seen Dr. Smith do that several times, and she perceives him as uninterested and unmotivated. She makes a mental note to write this at the end of his rotation evaluation. Dr. Smith attended the Thriving Intern webinar and practices feedback before feedback. He requests a short informal time for feedback prior to scheduled feedback or end of rotation evals. Dr. Reyes is pleasantly surprised at this request and obliges. She discusses her concerns with Dr. Smith, and now her perception of him has changed. The thing is that people have different cultural stances, especially with confrontation. So somebody can have a bad view of you, have a bad perception of you. And it's very, very common in some residencies that nobody tells you. That doesn't mean they're not talking about it. That doesn't mean it hasn't gotten to your residency director's ears, right? The only way to stop that is for you to go forward and ask. As I said, it's a bit of a harsh environment, and human beings in general don't really care about you that much. Unless you ask, nobody will tell you. So especially for the first 3 months where you may not know where you stand, ask your attending for feedback before feedback. So if it's 1 week evaluation, ask them before the 1 week ends. I know it can be very hard because intern year is difficult and very busy, but you have to have this at behind of your mind because it also helps you to become a better doctor. You can change, you can change and adjust as you're getting feedback from attendings or even residents. I would say ask your residents for feedback before feedback, because once they put something in your evaluation, it becomes a bigger issue. It's in the permanent record. And the thing is, you can have, as to Dr. Patel, what really happened to him was that they weren't putting it in his evals, but they were talking. And sometimes they don't put in your evals because everybody's busy. And then when the 6-month evals comes, the residency director tells the attendings, please put in your evals. And they put it 6 months after. So you have a bunch of bad evaluations that you could have changed your behavior and stopped that. Or they don't have any evals, but they're talking about you. And then at the end of the year, you're putting remediation and you weren't told about what you could change or what you could improve. So what this does is making sure that you are aware, where sometimes we're not aware of our blind spots, making you self-aware. And any reasonable person, any reasonable attendings are human beings too, but any reasonable one, once you do feedback before feedback, they will have the compassion. It will change perception of you, that even if they thought you were not, meeting certain competencies, once they write your evaluation, that will change it because it shows that you care about the rotation you're in or what you're doing. So another thing I say is find an ally mentor. So as an ally mentor, your attendings are not your ally mentors. They're your evaluative mentors. They're there to make sure you're reaching the competencies. So they're not really your friends. And in medicine, one thing that we make a mistake of doing is just because you're around a lot of senior doctors does not mean that you are being mentored by them. They don't, they have their own issues. They can teach you, but that doesn't mean you are mentored by them. That doesn't mean they're your allies. That doesn't mean they care about you past your rotations and your interactions with them. So you need an ally mentor. I cannot be an ally mentor for you because I'm not in your residency. I'm not, part of the structure or leadership. So you have to find somebody that you're comfortable with and that you can relate with in your program, somebody that looks like you, somebody that seems open, somebody you may have worked with, to become your ally, to really kind of advise you, correct you. You pursue a relationship with that person. It's not just, oh, this is my ally mentor, this is my friend. Ally mentor, I would say more attending or somebody that is really into medical education. Not all attendings are that teach. You have to look for ones that are into medical education that seem more open. Because they seem more open doesn't mean that they will seek you out. You have to seek them out and kind of look for a relationship. I'm going to stop and tell you a story of one of the doctors, Dr. Ronke did. Defisayo, or now Ronke Taiwo, and she talked about how her residency was a little bit borderline malignant. And she talks about how everybody used to ask her after she spent some years there, how she was so confident and she could talk to attendings and be herself. She was like, she's been there for such a long time and understands the culture. And one thing she makes sure she does is that she will ask and seek out younger interns and say, look, this is how this place is. This is how you should act. This is what you should do. So she was an ally mentor as a fellow to those younger interns, so they could navigate where they were. My point is, you need somebody like that that's going to tell you the culture of the place, that's going to tell you the expectations, that might tell you chatter about you. And also, you need a friend, that will mention your name in places you can't mention your name, that will fight for you when it comes for that. My ally mentor was my residency director. She was actually my ally mentor and fought for me through residency. So you need somebody like that in residency, and don't assume you're attending just because you see a leader attending. They have their lives. They probably, some of them could have chosen to practice because of location, not because they really care about teaching. They're also human beings. So make sure you have an ally that can mentor you. So your residents, I think residents have more of a significant influence on your practice of medicine, both in the present and the future. What I mean is that even my practice now, I remember the things that my ally mentor has told me. I remember the things that I saw residents doing, because that was when I was really learning how to be a doctor. So most of their practices, I copied it. Unfortunately, I also copied the bad ones. So you have to make sure you're not copying the bad habits of your residents, and also use feedback before feedback with them. I believe in prayer. Pray for good residents, because good residents will make you a good doctor. They significantly impact your intern year for better or worse. That's one of the things that was so horrible for me. For that third month, I had a horrible resident. Jason was a horrible resident. He was a horrible resident. He was already viewed as not too good. He had a bad attitude. I didn't get a lot of help from him. I think the worst thing was his attitude. He was such not a good resident for me. And it affected my trajectory. So they have a significant impact on you. And you pray for good ones, engage with good ones, ask good ones for feedback, and help them, because they're very stressed out. They're also doctors in training. A little bit more confident because of experience, but they do need your help. And this first year is going to pass very, very fast, I'm going to tell you. And make sure that you have positive interactions with your interns when you become residents, because the thing is, guys, these interactions you have in residency, they stay. I know people that when you remember, they're still bitter about things that happened in residency. They're still, angry. They're still a little bit hurt by it. I had PTSD when I had to go back to kind of do this talk, to prepare for this talk. So you can forgive somebody, they can forgive you, but how you made them feel is not easily forgotten. So just be kind to your interns and be good to them. So my next section is culture and recognizing abuse. So understanding culture. I think every workplace, whether you're an attending, intern, resident, has a culture. It's not necessarily good and bad, but a culture has good and bad aspects of it. So once you're there, I say for your first 3 months, understand the culture of a place. Understand what are the likes and dislikes of the culture. It can be simple things that, they don't like interns leaning on the wall, or they say that if you present with your too many notes, you're not prepared. Another residency can say if you have too many notes, you're well prepared. It's just these small nuances that build up a culture of a place. I'm not saying either, all the examples are just examples. I'm not saying either it's good or bad, but you have to understand the culture of a place and adapt to it. Because what I see most people doing, especially in the social media age, is writing about how bad something is. Show them some grace in terms of every human organization will have flaws. but you're not there to change it. And especially as an intern, you cannot change it. But when you're in a position of power, well, how I decided to change it is kind of maybe raise a generation of doctors that are different, but understand the culture of a place, understand the little nuances, understand their expectations. There are places you could write a certain note and get away with it. The other residencies, if you write that note, the residency director will call you. So, you have to understand the culture of a place. So what do you do if you find yourself in a residency with toxic culture, or if you find yourself in what I call a residency culture mismatch? What I would explain that as is where I came from a little bit laid back medical school. So I went to a very tough, very extremely type A environment. So there was a culture mismatch. And then, to be frank, perfectly frank, there are just some residencies that are toxic. No matter how much you interview, no matter how much you ask about them, you just may find yourself in a place that is toxic all by itself, or a place that is toxic to your own sense of self, or your own cultural understandings of things. So what I say is, know the difference between toxicity versus abusive. Toxicities are tolerable systems of practice in the work environment. These are little peculiarities I talked about. They're not very, very, very important. You should not fight over them, like pick your battles. I remember a physician talking about how she was fighting or with a scrub tech in the OR about nail polish, and she's like, where's the policy? And so she didn't have the policy, and so she wore the nail polish. Yeah, she's right, but at what cost? That tech is going to talk to the nurses who we know rule the OR. That tech will talk to the nurses who will talk to the attending, and then you have created this environment where you are working with people that may not like you, or have labeled you as a rebel, has labeled you as this. You wore your nail polish, yeah, is it maybe cultural thing for them, but you won at what cost? So pick your battles. If they say things that you don't necessarily agree with, that is unfair. It will happen because you're in a human institution that has its nuances, that has its flaws. Just do it, because you have to understand that intern year and residency is temporal. There's one thing that an attending told me when I was an intern or a resident, and he said, the day he found out that he can create his own future and he has job security and doesn't have to stay with a job he doesn't like as an attending, that's when he took control of his future. So he took 4 jobs out of residency before he found out which one he liked and stayed. The thing is that as an attending, you have that power to choose your future. You can decide to be part-time. It might just be a little bit of it might affect your life in a little way because you have to adjust, and we do have families. You don't want to uproot your family. But if I decide I don't like where I am, I can give them 4 months notice and leave. I love where I am right now. I love it. But I leave 4 months notice and leave, and I'm guaranteed I will find a job. So you want to get to that point. Your point is not to be fighting little battles with people. I have to make this thing about nurses, because nurses sometimes can be a problem to interns, but you do listen to them because they can save you. Have a humble posture with them. But especially female to female nurses, I've noticed sometimes there's a little bit of a clash. You're not there to fight those nurses. In 3 years, you're going to be giving them orders if you decide to stay in that residency. But if not, you're not going to talk to them anymore in your life. So know and understand the difference between toxic culture and abusive culture, and be pragmatic. And then recognizing abuse is, when you are seeing you are being picked out, standards are not systematically applied. My example is like in my residency, I could see the same thing happen to another person, a white resident who was a little bit much worse than me. I could see the same standards. But when you see things that are not applicable, only applicable to you or applicable to a section of people, that you now realize that might be some abuse going on. Recognize culture before you deciding who to report to. Abuse usually just happens more in a toxic culture. So if abuse is happening, they might not have the right systems to report it. You don't report to a residency director that has show those toxic culture, you try and find an ally mentor. You try and find somebody at the same level that can talk to whoever is abusing you, or you can find somebody above them that can talk to them, before engaging directly. You have to decide, is this a direct confrontation a wise choice? I would say speak out for abuse. Abuse should not be tolerated in any form. If you can't find somebody in your residency, you can reach out to Lighthouse, you can reach out to the ACGME, but there should be somebody that you can reach out to. Don't tolerate abuse. If it's a systematic thing where you see that, an example, I'll just use an example, like they make interns present for 5 minutes, but for you, they tell you need to do 15 minutes. Why? It constantly happens across the border with different attendings, with different residents, and you feel like you're systematically abused, then you have to speak out. Or if it's sexual, if it's physical abuse, whatever type of abuse it is. However, little things like you can't wear nail polish in the OR and they don't have the policy for that, just let that go. Just don't wear the nail polish. It's not that serious, but take abuse seriously. So, I'm going to say my next slide is about enjoying the moments of interning. Have fun in interning. It is possible. You're never going to be an intern again in your life. And I'm going to tell you guys, being on the other side can get repetitive. It can get boring doing the same thing over and over again, especially when you're an expert in it, meaning that you're seeing it so many times, it doesn't really move you. But that first time of doing certain things, of going to different rotations, enjoy those different aspects of medicine that you can get, because you're not going to be able to go back in your life and then do it again. I say leave the negativity at work. Don't dump on your partners or your family at home. Vent, not complain. I've had to kind of know the difference in my own life. Venting comes from a place of humility where you share your feelings, you share your frustrations, you share, the emotions you're going through. Don't suppress your feelings, because I do believe if you suppress your feelings, it's not healthy. But if you continually complain, especially vocally, that also can label you in residency. And as I said, people talk complaining, trying to say that you're right and everybody's wrong, you don't want that negative vibe. We're all favored to be in this profession, and it's actually a privilege, and we're here for our patients ultimately. I say find your tribe. I wish I did this in residency, but I just wanted to get out of that place. Be open, be friendly, find a support group that you can vent with, try to make connections. It's a temporal time, but it's a very, very formative time of your training. Be present, enjoy the moment with them, and find people you connect with, and build memories with them. And then I can't say this enough, do self-care, self-care, self-care. This is true for all levels. Once you're an attending, once you're a resident, intern, whatever. Do something for yourself every week. I do my bubble bath. I don't joke with it. I send flowers to myself. If it's gym, going to the gym. I do something for myself to show that I care about myself. And especially as an intern, you have to make sure that you're doing that. Show yourself kindness and grace, because mistakes will happen. And interning and residencies, to have that control environment of making mistakes and having somebody oversee you. Even as an attending, sometimes you miss that. And sometimes I will ask another attending, what do you think I should do with this case? Because it is a positive to have somebody looking over you, not just to correct you, but to train you, to make you a better doctor. Learn to rest, take your time, be kind to yourself, speak good to yourself, show yourself some grace, work hard, play hard, pray hard. I believe in prayer and God. And then, I always tell mentees and younger doctors that I come across with, I don't really use a Bible verse with them. When all fails, I just tell them, just keep swimming. Like Finding Nemo says, or Dory says in Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. There is light at the end of the tunnel. So I want to see if Dr. Nneoma is here. Oh yeah, she's here.
Hi. Hello? Can you hear
Oh,
me?
hi. Yes, sir. I can hear you. I was trying to figure out. Okay, over
Okay.
to you, Nneoma. So I wanted Nneoma to talk because, the danger of a single story, you don't want to just, she was one of the stars in residency. So you want somebody that had a good experience in residency to kind of talk to you guys, to give you her perspective, because she ended up being chief, right? Chief of her residency. And then she is also practicing GI doctor right now. So over to you, Dr. Nneoma Okoronkwo. It's showing Nneoma Okoronkwo, but
Yeah. That's just because professionally my license is still say my maiden name. So I just keep it on that for things like this. But thank you, Dr. Eniola, for inviting me here this morning to speak. I was on for the last probably 15, 20 minutes and I was listening to you. I would say that you have given a very, very thorough, interesting perspective. As you were speaking, I was just saying yes, yes, yes to like all of the things you were saying because I can still relate. And it's interesting that even though we went to very different residency programs, even in terms of location, even in terms of big or large programs, even in terms of predominant races or who is minority, who is not, we have similar experiences to say that in general, the general gist of residency programs all across the board could be very, very similar. So thank you for sharing that all with the team. And I'm sure that a lot of people will listen to this later on. Those who are listening now will gain some things and they will really appreciate your advice. Just to highlight some of the things you've said and probably add a little bit of my own experience too. So I'll give a background and sorry for the background behind me. I'm actually currently on call for GI. So this is like an endoscopy suite that I just stuck into in the middle of call to do this. So excuse what's behind me. But to give you my own little bit background, so I went to Howard University College of Medicine along with Dr. Eniola. We were in the same class. And then after that, I went to Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School in Newark, where I stayed on to be chief resident and also GI fellowship. And now I'm currently practicing. Inglewood is one of the main hospitals that I'm affiliated with. So residency, I would say that intern year for me was what I would say my favorite year. And the reason why was because I felt like it was when I thoroughly felt like now I was a physician. Like, I mean, even after you graduate from med school, the whole ceremony is done. Like, I didn't really get it until I really started seeing patients and interacting with them. Um, a lot of people were scared about intern year to start with. The reason why, sort of, I would say, a couple of reasons I will say why I walked into it like very happy, like excited. I can't wait to take this on. Is one, I spent the fourth year of med school, my last two months before graduation, doing what we called externships, and not just externships anywhere else, externships in places where I was given autonomy like a real intern, and it didn't matter to me in the sense that my grades were not being reflected there. I had already matched, so it had nothing to do with my academic career. It was just sort of a training ground for me before my real intern year started. And I know some people might not be in a position where they can do this, or maybe it's already too late. But I would say if someone is listening to this later on and they're thinking about something like this, I really say it's a good idea. I'll tell you why. I started intern year on night float. Night float for my program had the most autonomy ever. It was the scariest thing ever because you're on with senior residents, but senior residents are busy admitting and taking care of patients, and you're doing the cross coverage. And everyone knows in residency that it's the night time that everything that happens that is not supposed to happen happens. And so you're pretty much on your own trying to figure that out. And if you happen to see your senior resident who is also busy, then you're grabbing them on to deal with that. But I wasn't anxious because I had 2 months of experience before. And then in the externship I had done, through my medical school, they had what they call survival intern handbooks, that was a very good resource because it taught me basic things that I needed to know even before starting intern year. So I went through all of that. It's simple things like, okay, how to replace electrolytes, or when we use PO potassium versus IV potassium, when she use IV max. Oh, the nurse calls you at 2 a.m. for shortness of breath. This are some of the things you should be thinking. This is some of your checklists. Or you get called for chest pain. This is what you should be doing. So having that baseline was good because when I get calls, I already sort of know the preliminary things to do. And of course, the big thing is not pretending you know what you do not know, right? So you're not unsure about anything because that's very dangerous. Then I call my senior resident. But by the time I call my senior resident, they were like surprised and in awe that, oh, wow, so you did this already before talking to me? Because the average intern did not. So I said that to say that this is what I did in the beginning that I felt from day one set me out in terms of highlighted me in my program. And I will tell you that by the end of the month of my 9th residency, the senior residents were bragging to everybody that listened. We worked with this outstanding. I mean, I'm not saying that to praise myself because honestly, probably most of it is the grace and the favor of God. And trust me, and it was the insight that God gave me to do that, to also to be prepared before. But those were the things they were saying. Like, and it's interesting because one of the things I would say about intern year and residency is that your reputation matters. I cannot say that over and over again. Your reputation matters. So from day one, when no one knows you, that's your time to shine. That's your time that you make sure you're never late. You always come on time, at least 15 to 20 minutes on time. If you're starting, let's say not on night float, but you're starting on the medical wards or whatever it is, you're reading up on all your patients. You know them bread and butter in and out. If you want to be a superstar, you read up not on your patients, but also on your coworkers' patients. So on the day you're off and you happen to see their patients, you also know what's going on. Like you never want to be caught unprepared. Like it shows when somebody put in time and effort to do all those things before they come to round with the senior residents and the attendant versus someone who just woke up one morning, wore your new shiny white coat with a cup of coffee and you're strolling in 10 minutes before rounds. None. So I said that to say that after that, word travels fast. Everyone's talking about you. They're saying, oh, because the senior residents, as the year, first year, second year, third year goes by, they start to become friends, and it will happen to you too. You start to build your tribe, like Dr. Eniola was saying. And so they meet and they talk. It's like, oh, how was your intern? I was like, oh, my intern, she came, she didn't know this, she didn't know that. I don't know what med school she went to. They don't expect you to know everything, but of course the basics, and of course you know when to ask for help and to be hardworking. So if those things are lacking on your first day, it would show and it would make life difficult for you the rest of the way. So that's one big thing I would say. So as much as you can, be prepared, read up ahead about your patients, about the rotation you're starting. Some of my colleagues were starting in the ICU rotation. They read a book on how to basic ventilator settings. I did this also before my ICU rotation. I talked to someone who just left, the intern who just rotated before me on the ICU rotation. I said, hey, what was rounds typically like for you? What was expected for you? What time do you think is better to get there? Whatever time they gave you, do it 15 to 20 minutes before. You get the feel of it. So it shows when you go ahead and do your homework and you're prepared. The second thing I wanted to say that Dr. Eniola also alluded to, nursing staff, it's so helpful that you do not make enemies your intern year. I mean, by third year, there's some people who step on your toes and maybe deserve to in a professional way know not to do some certain things again, and you're in a position at that time to do that. But intern year, trust me, it's not the time, it's not the place. You take everything. And not that you accept like blatant racism or someone curses you out or any of those things. Those are unprofessional. But a lot of the things you let it go. Like one thing I would say about intern year for me, all the nurses were my friends, all of them. Nurses, social workers, caseworkers. Do you know, in fact, I didn't even know this about my program, but nurses and caseworkers, if they chose to, could go on and put an evaluation about you. I did not know this until at the end of the year, the lump sum of my evaluation was being written out. A nurse and a caseworker both went out of their way. They didn't have to. their evaluation doesn't necessarily count for your training. It's just something that looks good when someone just goes out of their way to say, hey, I went out of my way to comment about Dr. Okoronkwo because and they gave an example on the floor about how I went over and beyond for one of their patients. So it's and I didn't know that, but people watch you, and the nurses that, if you respect them, treat everyone with respect. Don't see them as people who are beneath you. If you think they are, and you go to work like they are, it would show in the way you relate with them, and you will not have a good professional working relationship. They're supposed to be partners with you in the healthcare system, taking care of the patients, and you should treat them as such. So when you come and an order was given 30 minutes ago and it still wasn't done, I asked, hey, Nurse Jackie, did you see the order I put in for this? Yeah, I didn't get to it. Please, okay, I understand that, but this patient really needs it. How can I help you to get that order in? Like you talk like that, as opposed to, Nurse Jackie, I gave this order 30 minutes ago. You didn't get it done? The nurse gives you some answer, and you're like, no, but she really needs it done now. Go now, please. Go now. Like, that's there's a way you relate to people that makes it seem like you care, you're part of the team, and you're friendly, you're easy to get in touch with. Don't be the person that every time they have to page you 10 times before they find you. That's also not good either. When you're good with your patients, you're good with your nurses, it really shows and it reflects broadly on you as a person. Another thing I wanted to mention is don't be a complainer. That's just very bad. I mean, everyone has things they want to complain about, because in reality, things can be improved on in any setting, even in the best professional work setting. But if your complaint is always like this, and your giant or cheerful attitude is like this, nobody wants to work with you. You don't want to be that person. I actually go to work in the morning happy. Maybe by the end of the day, I'm not as happy and as cheerful, but at least I can say that 24/7. People see me and they're like, this girl has a face of, why am I here? Who is punishing me? Why am I doing here? I can't wait to leave here. You definitely don't want to be that person. And I think the general theme is, like, when you go above and beyond in all that you do, be it punctuality, be it looking up your patients, be it helping your coworkers, be a team player, that's huge. You never want to make a senior resident look bad. If anything, you're there to make them look good in the beginning. And if you're someone who just wants to do something so that you shine and make a senior resident who look bad, it's also bad. Like, you want to be really part of a team. So if you do all these things, even people who have not met you, they will hear about you, and they come meeting you or working with you with this preconceived notion. And so, like, even if you make small earnest mistakes, it goes over their head, because the image you already have about you is like, you're this stellar person that everybody wants to work with. So that's actually very, very good. Up to Date is a good resource. Not the best resource for everything, but this is a good place to start to look up basic and quick information. But of course, stay on top of medical literature. I subscribe to a couple of things, to Medscape. Till now, I still read up articles and highlights of journals that they send. I subscribe to New England Journal of Medicine. Also for internal medicine at that time, it was ACP. So I subscribed to them. So not to say that every day I spent reading all of the above, but at least it came to my email. So during the weekends when I had some time, I'll just click through and read up on all the newer things. So I would even at least know about things even before my attendants did, because they hadn't got a chance to read it yet. It might not be in detail, but at least the general, oh, do you know there's a new medication for heart failure now? At least I would know about, oh yeah, I saw that. I didn't read the article in detail, but I'll get a chance to read it later. It shows that you're okay. So I think a lot of that is pretty much most of the things I wanted to highlight. Just go the extra mile for your patients. Don't be the person that says, your work is done at 7 p.m. and then you have a crashing patient with a pulmonary embolism. You're picking up your bag and your coffee and say, I'm going home. It's never done. Just be prepared that intern year you're dedicating most of your life and time to work. And so if you have a crashing patient, you stay and see it through. It's not a shift work. So don't be the person that every time when they publish the schedule for the month and your colleague sees your name, they're like, oh, I have to work with Dr. This person again. No, you want to be that person. Oh, yes, I have this person. Perfect. We'll make a good team. Why? Because you're known as a team player. You're known as a hard worker. You're punctual. You read. You're resourceful. The things you say you don't know, you don't know. No one is expecting you to know everything, but they're expecting you to go above and beyond to look up stuff. And when you don't know, say you don't know. We had an intern that would lie that they saw a patient when they didn't, and would even write a full progress note. That's a no. That's ground for getting kicked out of residency. You definitely don't want to do that. If you do not see the patient yet before rounds, someday, whatever happened, you are dealing with another crashing patient, please say you did not. Don't lie. It's very dangerous to patient care. I wanted to also piggyback on what Dr. Eniola was saying about having allies. I could not overemphasize that. For some reason, when I got to residency, or when I got to intern year, there was a senior resident who was third year at that time, who for some reason just took a strong liking to me. Nothing, this person's probably about 20, 30 years above me. And he worked with me and for some reason really, really loved me and just went on to tell everybody or to spread that reputation of, oh, this is a great intern. And so the first year when there was an award in the program that you had to vote for intern of the year in my program, most of the senior residents had not worked with me at that time. I mean, after a couple of months, this is maybe 6, 7 months in, there are only a few number of people. My program was considered a large program that you would have worked with, maybe 1/3 of the senior resident class. And that's the second year, not even the third year class. This person was a third year class. But I got almost most of the votes for intern of the year. The reason why is because for some reason, he'd taken upon himself to rally people to vote for me for that award because he really thought I deserved it. It's crazy how just having someone in your corner to speak up for you, to rally for you, to sing your praises, to just have you, to just support you makes all the world of the difference. And there was someone else who I thought was also equally as deserving, and the person didn't win it, but I think what made the difference between the two of us, not because the person I was necessarily a better intern than he was, because he also was a superb intern, was I think just having that person in my corner made a lot of difference. And that person I'm talking about in my corner had went on to be my ally mentor, like Dr. Eniola was saying. He actually went on to be chief the year after. I didn't know he was going to be chief. And it actually really helped to have another chief who was your ally mentor. But these things can only happen when you yourself, you set yourself in high standards and be deserving of the people who hold you to high esteem. Finally, the one thing I'll always add is prayers. Every morning as I drove to work, couple of things I'll say: Lord, grant me favor, and I'll start naming people one by one. I'll start with my attendants, my senior residents, my co-workers, my nurses, my patients, and if there were particular people I wanted to name, I start listing them one by one every morning routinely on my way to work. And I really believe in the power of prayer. I believe in the power of God. I believe in God giving people grace and supernatural favor that far exceeds everything that we can humanly explain. So that's why in the beginning, when I started to say of all of these things, and I know that there was hard work on my part, effort on my part being put into it, because I would go home some nights and really be tired, but lazily studying or flipping through a book. So I do know hard work was being put in, but God was the one who crowned my efforts with success. So definitely everyone is here. If you're not a Christian, I'm sure Dr. Eniola would help you out with that. I'll talk to you a little bit more about Jesus. But for those who are, definitely pray every single day. It will make a world of a difference and it will show. So I have talked for a long amount of time. If you leave me, I'll keep on talking forever because I have stories. I was, as a chief resident, I had to sit on a committee that really, you guys don't know what goes on behind the scene. We talk about each single intern one by one. And everyone in this committee of 10 people, we bring up random instances that we had with the intern. No matter how small you think they're insignificant, it's been aired in that meeting, in that conversation, and then we assign people's scores based on different aspects of their clinical competency. So being on both sides, it's really interesting. So I could give you 1,001 experiences, but I would not go there, of course. I just want to leave you with that piece of information in addition to what Dr. Eniola had said. But I'm sure you would do well. Intern is like, it was so fulfilling for me. It was so fun. I enjoyed the ride. and I trust you will do well too. You got this. You got this. You made it through step 1 of medical school, step 2, 3rd year, 4th year. You got intern year. So good luck.
Thank you so much, Dr. Okoronkwo. This is, you know, it can only be God that he said I should choose you, because we had such different intern years. I can never say my intern year was great. She, you know, she had such a fun time, and I'm so thankful that, you know, you don't just have a single story. You have somebody that had the other aspect, and you are also kind of like saying the same thing I said. So I know that, you know, I'm saying the truth. Okay, I'm not just forming these things, and I thank you so much, Dr. Nneoma. I'll go back. I'll just quickly round up because we are almost done right now. Let me go back to my presentation, share screen. So, is it working? Okay, so thank you, and God's favor. You can email us at lighthousescholar@gmail.com. I'll end by saying giving forward by basically going back and making sure you're mentoring your interns, mentoring medical students. Once you're out of this phase of your training, you can't change the system immediately, but you can kind of change it by raising a generation. So give forward by giving forward to them, by looking back and lending a helping hand. So thank you for everyone that came in. Thank you for everyone that's going to listen again. If you have any questions, email us and then go to our website. Thanks, guys.